Welcome to the Alaska Report. I'm Senator Mark Begich. This show is designed to inform you about issues, programs, and people important to Alaska. This month, I'm proud to host two Alaskans who know a thing or two about serving their communities and dealing with the nuts and bolts of local government. I'm pleased to welcome Kodiak Borough Mayor Jerome Selby and Ketchikan City Manager Karl Amylon. Both Ketchikan and the Kodiak Borough have sent delegations to Washington, D.C. to meet with federal officials and share the needs of their communities with the federal agencies and the Alaska delegation. Gentlemen, let's start by talking about what brought you here to Washington, D.C. And I always like to tell folks, especially who are watching, we get a lot of visitors from Alaska, and especially government officials. They wonder what you do back here. But I know you're back here busy trying to represent your community and talk about the issues not only to the delegation but to agencies. Let me start with you, Jerome, who I have to say, we were joking before we went on the air, I think you have been mayor since Kodiak begun as a community, but you have been mayor for a long time, and I know you know the community a great deal. But tell me some of the issues you brought here to Washington, D.C. and to the delegation, and what agencies you're trying to visit with and get their attention.
Well, with Kodiak, it's always fish. Is at least part of the agenda. So we always have fisheries issues that we come, and that's partly what we're here for. Mm-hmm. We have some other issues on bear refuge, lake fertilization, of trying to maintain some salmon stocks.
Energy also?
Oh, pardon?
Energy too, hydro project?
And energy, hydroelectric, and wind. Our goal is to try to be 95% reliant on hydro and wind by 2020. So.
Yeah, actually, if I can, before I ask Karl you to respond, I'm curious, this is one issue that's always brought some interest to me, and that is 10, 15 years ago, where was Kodiak with renewable energy? What percentage of what would you guess your percentage of your energy supply was back then?
Well, 10 years ago, we did have the Terra Lake Hydro in place. So if you go back to 20 years ago, though, we basically were about 99% reliable on oil.
On oil?
Yeah, oil diesel generators drove the whole system.
Costly, pollution, hard to get if the weather's bad.
All those things.
And where are you now in your renewable
so now
energy?
We're about 20 megawatts, which some days will run our demand.
The whole demand of the community?
Comes from Terra Lake. But the reality is that right now we're probably we were about 80% with just the hydro.
Wow.
When we added the 3 wind generators that we do have in place that are fully operational at this point, we moved up to about between 85 and 90% on renewable. And the plan is to put a 3rd hydro in place and then add 3 more wind generators, which will take us up to that 95% level.
That's impressive.
Going forward. So.
Well, I will tell you, I've used Kodiak renewable energy discussion here in Washington as an example, because people look at Alaska and they think all we do is use oil and gas because we're such a dependent state on our revenue sources from oil and gas. And when I explain that communities like yours have really stepped it up and gone to renewable energy, not just in one segment, hydro, but hydro, wind, and trying to become more conservation focused too, that you have done something that most communities around this country would be envious of. So I know when I was there, I saw those winds turning, and that just told me a little bit how windy it was too. Karl, tell me some of the issues that you brought from the city's perspective.
Well, Senator Ketchikan is in D.C. this week to talk about energy as well, or the lack thereof. As we've discussed on previous occasions, the application of the roadless rule in Tongass by Judge Sedgwick is really at a point now where it's going to stifle Ketchikan's ability to grow and move forward in the future. We're fortunate in that we have hydro generation at our disposal, but the demand is growing exponentially, and we're at a point now that even with the excess energy available from the Tyee project, we're forced to run diesel. We're just not being given the opportunity to develop new hydroelectric opportunities.
Let me ask you, especially roadless, because Kodiak's over here, Ketchikan's down here, but Ketchikan is connected to the southeast, and the efforts that are going on down there in regards to renewable energy, hydro energy, and so forth. The roadless rule, and it's interesting how it connects, even though you're, as we would describe here, miles and miles and miles apart, but in reality, in Ketchikan, because of the roadless rule, it not only affects you and your community, it affects almost all of Southeast and its ability to develop new renewable energy resource. Is that a fair statement and what's going on down there?
Absolutely. If you look at what we've accomplished in the last 2 years with the completion of the Swan Tyee intertie, the plan moving forward was to take available energy from Tyee and supplement that with additional hydro projects along that transmission corridor. Again, given the reinstatement of roadless, we don't have that ability to move these additional hydroelectric projects forward. Thus, it's going to force communities like Cake, for instance, to continue to rely on excessively expensive diesel to meet their energy needs.
And one of the biggest challenges in Southeast, I know when I first came in the office here, even before that when I was mayor and we were working from the mayor's conference on a broader sweep, energy was always and has always been kind of the top issue. And in Southeast, it's always been how do you develop an intertie system that connects everybody, but also these hydro projects. And so it's not like these are new projects that something yesterday everyone said we should develop. They've been in development stage for years.
Absolutely.
And now the roadless rule comes along that the federal government, or the judge in this case, has placed down and reinstituted, and everything kind of goes in the whole pattern.
In the case of Ketchikan, we have a FERC license to develop the Whitman Lake hydroelectric project, 4.6 megawatt plant that will probably give us about 16 million kilowatt hours a year. If that project can't move forward, I'm probably going to have to burn 1.1 million gallons of diesel a year to make up that lost energy production.
And what are you paying now for per gallon about for diesel?
We just bought 80,000 gallons of diesel over the weekend at $3.93
a gallon.
A gallon.
So people can quickly, if they do that calculation, this isn't cheap.
No, I mean, if we had to continue to make that kind of expenditure, you're looking at energy production costs roughly about 26 cents a kilowatt hour, whereas what we're buying now from the Southeast Alaska Power Agency is at 6.8 cents.
Big difference.
Big difference.
To consumers, to businesses.
Absolutely.
Same thing probably in Kodiak. One of the reasons why you're trying to create diversified revenue or energy sources is to ensure that you can create a stable, reliable source. Is that a fair? Because you have also the largest Coast Guard base, pretty big.
And we have
needs
a
energy
demand for our fish processing.
Oh, that's right.
Which is our biggest users of energy.
Yes.
And so if you're burning diesel, just the wind generators, the 3 wind generators that we have cut over 1 million gallons off of the oil bill in Kodiak in the last year's time.
That's amazing.
So, you know, do the math, that's $4 million. That's how they're paying for the wind generators, just from the energy savings, the cost of fuel savings is paying the debt service on the wind generators. I
know my last visit, you know, both to Kodiak and Ketchikan. Kodiak was during ComFish, which is always exciting because when you're there around fishermen, they all have issues about everything.
Oh yeah.
But I got to tour one of the plants and be able to see some of what's going on there, but also got a chance to really see some of the fishermen's concerns, and I'm assuming the same thing down in the Southeast, that the cost of fuel is making it more difficult or more expensive, obviously, to figure out how to fish and how long you can fish. Is that a fair statement in both of your communities?
Absolutely.
I think it is.
Yeah, and it's a real problem for the fishing fleet because, and it's a problem economically because what they're being forced to do, whether they want to or not, is consolidate more cash onto one vessel. So where you may have had 4 or 5 vessels going out with 3 or 4 crew members each, just because of the cost of fuel, you now only take one vessel out, and they take turns which vessel goes out any given week. But you can, it really cuts down on crew income, and the cash flow changes within the community, driven by the cost of fuel.
So in essence, again, in both of your communities, if I'm correct here, what I see happening is as they fish less time or potential less revenue stream means that will not flow through that economy to the small diner, to the food servicing people, to the folks that outfit the ships, or just the after effect when the fishermen finish their season and they're at home, they may have less disposable income. Is that
I would
fair?
agree with that.
Absolutely.
So it's a big challenge we have.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, and we may add more to this as we move into after we get out of the break here. We're about 3 or so minutes before we go to break, and that is the Coast Guard. Coast Guard important to both of your communities, specifically to Kodiak, specifically to Ketchikan, but also from a broader sweep in the sense of the communities that surround you, the fishing community. First, let's go to Kodiak. I've been to the Coast Guard base there. It's impressive, to say the least. I actually got trapped there, almost couldn't get out, and I knew it was bad weather when the Admiral didn't fly in. I knew at that moment this was bad weather. The Coast Guard guys aren't coming in. But impressive. But what are some of the benefits for having a Coast Guard base directly on in your community?
Well, a big benefit, of course, is the baseline economy of just that Coast Guard payroll. There's a close connection in Kodiak that you don't find in most other communities between the Coast Guard base and the community. A lot of interaction. A lot of the folks who are Coast Guard wives work in the Kodiak community. A lot of the kids all go to school together, so you have a lot of interaction between folks in the Coast Guard and the Kodiak community, much closer than most communities. So that's a big plus. But the really big plus for us, again, comes back to fish, because those are the guys who keep our fishing fleet fishing safely. When things go awry out there, the Coast Guard comes out and helps, gets the vessel, either gets the vessel safely back or rescues the crew if the vessel goes down. You can't put dollars on the value of that to a large fishing fleet like we have in Kodiak, which is the third largest fishing port in America.
Right. It's interesting from the Kodiak perspective. I mean, the Coast Guard is such an important piece of the life safety of what goes on in fishing. Before we take a break, I want to digress just for a moment, if I can, to kind of a national issue. By the time this is playing, this show will play throughout the month of May, but at the beginning of the month, as you know, we were able to, from the Armed Services Committee membership that I serve on, we were able to kill bin Laden, an amazing effort by the intelligence divisions of the military, as well as the military men and women who serve our military. Amazing feat after 10 years. Any thought on that? I mean, right now as we talk, there are thousands of Alaskans literally serving in Afghanistan, over 4,000, and this has a direct impact. But any thought on that, from your perspective, Karl?
I think it shows that no one should question America's resolve when it comes to the war on terrorism. That this was a person that needed to be dealt with, and it took 10 years and a lot of effort, but this country followed through.
Right. I think that's you know, as the president said, and, you know, justice has been done. I mean, he was responsible for thousands of Americans killed here on our soil, and then, of course, in our war in Afghanistan. Jerome, do you have any thought on that? I know it's kind of a global issue, but you know, a lot of things we deal with, they're global in perspective.
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, we've all waited for 10 long years for this day, and it's finally arrived after the terrible tragedy in New York City.
That's right.
And that this guy was primarily responsible for, along with a number of other things. Thank you, by the way.
Yes.
But it makes me proud of our servicemen and women for the job they're doing over there, and the fact that, you know, they were given a mission, they carried out that mission and got the job done. And of course, we continue to pray for their safety while they continue that mission. The job's not all done yet, so they still got work to do. So.
Well said, and like you said, we'll pray for those servicemen and women as they continue to fight the battle on terrorism, and know we've taken a pretty big target out now. Yeah. Let me take a short break here. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with our two guests.
I wasn't going to school because I was making money stealing cars. Well, I was 10 when I first got involved with drugs. I skipped school because, you know, nobody cared.
When I first got pregnant, school was not important to me, so I dropped out.
Well, if I don't finish school, then I can't go to college. I mean, that's the whole point of what I want to do with my life.
I still need to go to school to make it for myself.
I think I'm happier now. I know I'm happier now.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital. I feel like a fish with no water.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor. Because even one attack is one too many.
Welcome back to Alaska Report. I'm Senator Mark Begich. Today I'm talking with members of local government from Kodiak and Ketchikan. My guests are Mayor Jerome Selby from the Kodiak Island Borough and Karl Amylon, City Manager for Ketchikan. Again, thanks for joining us. I know you've had a busy schedule here in Washington, D.C. Part of always is to get adjusted to the 4-hour difference, you know. And if you're like what we experience here, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock hits here, but then your offices start calling, I bet you, because it's only 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock there, and they wonder why you're at dinner. And they're saying, what are you doing? And just got back from lunch. But it is one of the struggles of working back here is those 4 or 5 hours, but I know you probably got right on the ground when you landed and got busy, and jet lag was not part of the equation. Is that a fair statement?
I think so.
You'll catch it on the way back, right? That's the most important thing. Let me, Karl, let me talk to you. I was in Ketchikan not long ago, and I always enjoy going down there. We have always a town hall meeting, and it's always, it was amazing actually. I got to acknowledge this. I was in Ketchikan that day, and if you remember, it was a very nice day, very sunny day. We had a town hall meeting. It's like Kodiak. Sunny day. Are you going to get anyone that shows up? And we had a full house. It was all kinds of questions too. And I got to tell you that the Ketchikan residents, one, they're not bashful about telling you what you think, but they always suggest ideas, and they're always kind of looking, and I would say this for anyone in Alaska, Kodiak too, they're always looking kind of what's the next opportunity to move the community forward. And what I've always noticed, every time I go back to Ketchikan, there's some project being done or some new development. And the one that impressed me, which has been ongoing for some time, is the Ketchikan boat yard there, the shipyard. That's building, maintaining, and growing in their shipbuilding there. Can you tell, you know, you'll probably tell me a lot of what I saw, but really to our listeners and viewers, what's really unique about it?
Alaska Ship and Dry Dock is really started, I think, to position Ketchikan to become a maritime center in Southeast. They're under construction now for their enclosed ship fabrication facility.
Right, an expansion, because business is good.
It is good. Down at Berth 3 right now is the Susitna that they recently completed that will be coming up north.
Beautiful ship. I walked on it.
It's a phenomenal vessel. 60,
70 million, I can't remember, somewhere right in that range.
Somewhere in that range, I believe.
But all built
in Alaska
with Alaska labor.
And I think the vision and the next thing that the shipyard has in mind is the Alaska class vessels for the Marine Highway System.
Yes.
And I know the folks down at the shipyard are working closely with the governor and our state delegation to see that that happens.
That's right. I know that's, as you know, my opinion on that. I'm pretty strong about that. I think it's a great project, especially our new class of Marine vessel. And my view is, I know there's a desire by the state administration to go through this process and this very competitive process. The reality is we should build it with our people and our ship. And I'm biased about this. I will acknowledge this. And I think the way we can secure the value, making sure that it's good value, is there's companies that will actually assess the value of that construction before it's done to make sure the state gets the fair shake. But my view is we should allow the Ketchikan shipbuilding facility to do its, to do the first ship, and then after that there'll be 2 or 3, I think, if I remember right, 2 more that they can do those on a competitive basis. But they got to have the first shot, I think.
And they've demonstrated they have the ability to do that kind of shipbuilding, and I think you're right. They do deserve the shot. I
think so. I mean, I sat there. Besides that town hall meeting I did to the whole community, I did a town hall meeting with the employees there at the dry dock, and it was exciting to hear their excitement about the potential of building a ship that not only they can build in Alaska, but it will stay in Alaska and be used by Alaskans.
And
that's the
what's
ultimate.
really nice to see is they've gotten the confidence now that they have that skill set, that they can do the work, and it's something that can benefit the state.
And one thing I know about that's another, if you thought about, again, 10 years ago where they are today and the amount of jobs that have been created now, and the potential in the future is pretty significant.
It's remarkable.
Yeah. Now in Kodiak, there's something unique up there also. Down in Ketchikan, it's shipbuilding, but in Kodiak, it's the Kodiak Launch Facility, a high-tech launch facility for satellites or missiles and so forth, and one that we have here supported greatly because we think it's an important asset. There's a good amount of state and federal resources, a lot of federal resources invested in its infrastructure. Tell me a little bit about, and keep in mind that some people who watch our show may not have any idea what we're talking about. So give a little 101 on what the Kodiak launch facility is, but really what the value is to Kodiak.
Well, the value is it's about $1 million in the economy per launch that's additional that wasn't there before. So in a community that's about 90% reliant on fish resources for revenue and economic base, it's a welcome expansion, if you will, of our economic base.
If I can pause you, it's like Ketchikan, which was mostly timber for many, many, many years, diversifying, and Kodiak is making the same steps. Fisheries is its predominant, but trying to diversify.
Right. And so it's a privately developed, one of the only rocket launch that's actually a private operation, not military. They do contracts with the military just like they'll do contracts with anyone else.
That's right.
But it's not controlled and overseen by a military operation. That's unique. It's also unique from the perspective of it is the best polar launch site on planet Earth, because you have the biggest widest range of degrees that you can launch a satellite out of there into a polar orbit around the Earth of anywhere on Earth, because there's nothing south of us except water.
That's right. Location, location, location.
So you don't have to worry about anything falling down on any cities or anything else, because it's all out over the Pacific Ocean. So that's one of the biggest selling points for that facility. They've had like 10 or 12 successful launches off of the facility, so it's a proven launch facility at this point in time. They're out looking for more business at all times. The most recent ones set up a number of communication satellites on one rocket, because that's, again, because of economic necessity. Folks are no longer sending up one satellite on one rocket.
That's right.
They're looking to stack 4 or 5, or I think this one had like 12 different communication satellites loaded on the nose of a large rocket that went up into polar orbit. So they're open for business and looking for more business. They're constantly upgrading the facility, and I think they can compete basically with any place in the United States in terms of a quality launch opportunity for different launch facilities.
I know our missile defense system that's out of Fort Greely has used it multiple times, and very successfully.
Yes.
We will point that out, especially I like to point that out so our military friends hear that, so they can continue to use it. But it's a great asset. Again, from a global perspective of Alaska, it's a great diversification of what we do.
Right.
Taking our assets of, in this case, location, which is important. Same thing with the shipbuilding. Location is important, because a lot of those ships would go down to Seattle and be renovated or worked on, or in some cases obviously built elsewhere. So it creates a unique, diversified, and all good paying jobs in both of these new fields. Is that a fair statement? That they're not, they're not the $6, $7 minimum wage, $7.75 or whatever the minimum wage at that point is when they got hired. It's pretty good wages.
They're the kind of jobs that make a community sustainable.
That's right. Tell me, from both of your communities' perspective, what is the greatest challenge you see from your community, and what needs to be done from a broader perspective? And if I can start with you, Jerome, and then we'll go to Karl, if that's okay. Just kind of what's the challenge that you I don't want to say stay up all night thinking about, because I don't want you to be too stressed out about, but I know what local government's like as a former mayor. But what's the issue that really, from your perspective, you think is important that needs to be dealt with from a state and or federal or combo?
Well, I think that I would say it's over-regulation. We see many regulations, both federal and state, that we deal with and try to get projects and things accomplished in a community, and we always keep banging into all these requirements of regulatory requirements that they really don't make sense in Kodiak, Alaska. They might make sense in Los Angeles
That's right.
Or someplace else, but they don't make sense in Kodiak, Alaska. One case in point is that we have some of the cleanest, finest drinking water in the world.
That is true.
And we are required to spend, I think it's like $9 million to put a water treatment system in that I think anybody who is rational, who looks at it, would say, we don't think you really need that. Because it's the kind of water treatment system that you would have in Los Angeles, California, literally. So why are you putting that high-tech water treatment plant into water that tests clean on any day of the week and obviously doesn't really need additional treatment to be safer drinking water than many cities in our country. And I don't want to talk about that too much,
yeah,
but
no,
the fact is we have good, clean drinking water, but we're being required to treat it the same as if it was terrible water.
Right. It's the one thing when I go back, as my frequent trips back to Alaska, I look forward to is drinking the water out of the tap, because it is it's a big difference in what it tastes like. And we call the regulatory process, we've used a phrase recently when we were talking about some of the oil and gas industry, we call it the whack-a-mole regulatory. You know, as soon as you hit one, another one pops up, and you're busy trying to figure out how to deal with that one. You pop that one down, and another one pops up. But it is a great challenge. Karl, what from your end is kind of the big challenge hanging out there? That
it's going to be developing a long-term affordable energy supply. That's the bottom line for Ketchikan and Southeast. If we can't do that, then the outlook for our long-term economic viability isn't good. And I do want to thank you for your help that you've given us relative to the Forest Service and the Department of the Agriculture. Well,
I'll tell you, I appreciate that. I got a great staff here, and obviously throughout Alaska, that you all utilize at times, and we'd encourage you to continue to do that. We think we have a good staff that's a strong advocate on every issue that's Alaskan, and we're not afraid. You know, we come here with kind of the Alaska attitude that we're going to ask any question, every question to anybody. We're not going to, you know, fall into some traditional protocol. If we think there's an issue important to a community, we're going to raise the question. We're going to push the envelope. And what makes it easy, to be very frank with you, is folks like you that have come to us and said, here's the information, and it's not some pie in the sky concern. It's really real stuff that you're just looking for a practical solution. You're not looking for any free handout. You're not looking for any special favor. You're just saying, just treat us equally, but keep in mind our unique circumstances. As you brought up on the water, you know, as I sympathize always when I have mayors and city managers, because as a former mayor, you know, it's sometimes we saw it for real, when a regulation came down or a ruling or a funding source, how to deal with it. So it's a struggle, but we'll continue to pound away as necessary here. I will want to say this, and again to folks that may be watching that are from your communities, you know, because I know they always will ask you at city council meetings or, you know, through your budget process, why did you spend this money to go to D.C.? Well, I'll tell you, from my perspective, it's a high value. It's a high value to have you here. It's important to have that face-to-face, and it's important that when you go to agencies and really pitch it to them about what's going on in Alaska, because when they see it for real, from a person like yourself, it makes a difference. So I want to thank you for traveling this distance, getting adjusted on the time zone change, and not missing a beat with the agencies that you are meeting with, and the delegation, and our staffs too. So again, want to thank you both for being here, being part of the report, and Alaska Report. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. For all the viewers, again, we're running out of time on the Alaska Report, but I want to thank both Jerome and Karl for being here. They did a great job representing Alaska, visiting our agencies, but also visiting the delegation and making sure we are reminded of the important things back to Alaska. Again, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again.